Welcome back. Today I thought I would share a technique I use often to minimize flyaways. I find it a little easier than the combination of clone and heel brush I know some people still use. I want to take you through two images today, one of my own, very simple fix so you get the hang of the correction, and then another image submitted by fellow headshot crew member Carol from Western North Carolina. Before we get into those though, let's take just a quick review of where in my workflow I do these fixes. So this is my workflow. I have a video that describes this in greater detail. I'll put a link to that in the comments. I do these hair fixes, this grafting technique, very early in the affinity photo process that I use. So I've already done the adjustments on the raw file in terms of exposure and contrast to get that image where I want it. And then before I start what I call the heavy lifting of the normal, retouching as we would call it, there are no regret fixes that I know I need to fix and the client is not going to have an issue with. Removing the lights, extending the background, and grafting. Typically it's hair. Occasionally there's a mouth or an eye swap that gets stuck in there as well. But that's where it goes. Okay, let's get started. So here we are in Affinity. This is Steve. He's a local model and actor that I photographed late last year, just before we went into the second lockdown. I've done all the corrections I needed to in Capture One, the contrast, the exposure corrections. I whitened the background in Capture One. And then I brought it over to Affinity Photo where I extended the background and removed the lights. And now I need to do a hair graft because this hair on the top of his head is looking a bit funky. We had a good flow going during the shoot, so I didn't want to interrupt it. He just reached up and put his hair in a bun, and I thought that's a cool look and continued shooting. And I saw it, but I also knew that it was easy to fix, so that's what we're going to do now. So start with the lasso, and we're just going to grab very wide as we can, a portion of his head. And we're going to feather it, maybe 35 picks or so. It's less important on a white background, but if you do this on a gray background, which would be the next image we do, this will make sure that we don't get any artifacts of showing the demarcation of the selection. Now that that's done, I'm going to hit Command C to copy it. And the moment I hit Command V to paste it, you'll see another layer show up here. And that is now just a copy of the selection that we copied. I'm going to zoom in, and I'm going to take this new layer that was just created and change the opacity down to 50% for a stretch. And that allows me to move and still see the image underneath. And now this is a little bit of finicky work. I'm looking for an anchor that I can use on the background layer, and I'm looking at this area here, this hair bump right there. And I think that would work well. And then I might stretch it out because I don't want it to have an issue here where it comes over. And then I'm just moving it and positioning it where I think it looks the best. And I'm liking that. That looks pretty good. All right, so now let's move that background layer back to 100%. Let's select paintbrush just to get rid of some of this boxing, and then let's get rid of those marching ants. And that, I know that looks horrible, don't worry about it. So on that background layer, well, that's selected, let's add a mask. And then that mask, Command I to invert. And then while that mask is selected, paintbrush with 100% flow and 100% opacity on white that I want, there you go. And I'm just now going to paint. And if I get too far, like I've done here, I hit X, it moves it to black, and I can get rid of that. And I can reverse what I've done. And there you go. And then maybe with a small soft brush, just to blend in. So I'm now in white again, and I'm just blending in where I copied and pasted it. And there you go. That is the move. And you can see it with, that's what we started with, just toggling the layers, and that's where we are. And that, I didn't use a clone brush, I didn't use a heel brush, And that's as easy as we can make it. Okay, so we're going to now do this on another image that we have here. This is Genevieve, or Genevieve, I guess. This is not my photograph. This was captured by fellow headshot crew member Carol in North Carolina. And she submitted this image to me for me to show her my workflow with one of her shots. And she's graciously allowed us to use this image for this video. So we've done the corrections we need to do in Capture One. We've brought it across to Affinity. We've removed the lights. And we can see now we've got some hair flyaways that are the retoucher's worst nightmare. And they happen. You just got to deal with them. So let's get started. Let's start with the top. I'm on the background layer. I'm going to choose my lasso brush. I'm going to pick a healthy selection. And I've still got my feather on, which is perfect. I'm going to hit Command-C to copy, Command-V to paste. That paste will generate a new background layer, which is containing just this selection, appropriately feathered. I'm going to reduce the opacity of that new background layer. Let's call it top for now, top of the head. And I'm going to use the move tool, and I'm going to zoom in a bit. And you can see there's a couple of things I want to point out to you. You can see the original profile of the head, where the hair line or the profile of the head would be if there was no flyaways. That is a reference point on my background layer. And you can see these flyaways between that and the background that I want to reduce. So while I've got the top of the head layer selected, I'm just going to move that down. And I can still see, because the opacity on the layer is 50%, I can still see the profile of the head in the original background layer, as well as I can see the flyaways, and where I can move this layer and position it, and I can even, if you will, rotate it a slight amount to where I want the flyaways to go in relation to the profile of the background layer. And if you don't get it right the first time, you just delete the layer and you do it again. But I think that looks pretty good. So let's move the opacity back up to 100%. I'm going to add a mask. I'm going to invert the mask. I'm going to paint. That should get rid of all of these other markings, take the marching ants off. And with the mask selected, in white, with a relatively hard small brush, I'm going to paint. And I'm going to stop painting at the line where I want the profile of the head to be. So that's the original. And I might have to, if I hit X, change the color back to black, and hit X again, back to white. This is just the painting the mask, and sometimes you got to go back and forth. So I paint in white when I want the new top of the head layer to show, and I paint in black, X, to change when I want the background layer to come back up. And that looks pretty good. So if I toggle that on and off, we went from there to there. I could probably do a little bit more over here. So let's go back onto the mask layer in white and just take some of that off. There you go. X to get to black and bring some of this back just to make it look a little bit natural. Okay, if you don't like it, again, just delete that layer and do it again. But that's okay. I still want it to look natural. And that looks pretty good. All right, so let's move to this side of the head. Now you can see the flyaways disappear for a moment right here. Let's just change my cursor. So that gives me a pretty good spot where I can do this side of the head in two segments as opposed to one. So with the background layer selected, that's important. Always go back to the original background layer. Lasso tool, I'm going to grab from here and to the top of the head. There we go. And that's good. The feather is still on. Copy, paste. That'll generate a new background with just that selection copied into it. Let's call that right side top, and move the opacity down to 50% so we can see both underneath and that new layer. Use the move tool, and I'm now just going to move it. So I can see, I know it's challenging to see, but I can see the profile of the head underneath, and I can see the flyaways of the layer on top. And I'm just moving the flyaways to where I want them to be. And that looks good. All right, move that back up to 100%. Add a mask, invert that mask. Choose my paintbrush, get rid of all these marching ants. While I'm painting in white, brush while I'm painting in white. There you go, on that mask. And I'm just going to paint. And I'm going to stop painting. Let me just soften that brush a bit, and I'll stop painting where I want the original hairline to stay. And all I'm doing is I'm shifting those flyaways inwards. Okay, that went a bit too far. That went a bit too far. There you go. And it's just, it's a judgment call where what you keep, what you take away. But you've got two layers to play with. And let's take a look at what that looks like now. So let's toggle that off and on. And all I've done is I'm keeping the flyaways. I'm just laterally shifting them closer to the head so they're not as prominent. And you just rinse, repeat now. So the trick is to always go back on the lasso tool, always go back to the original background layer when you make your selection. And let's choose here. There you go, feather, copy, paste. There's the background layer, move it to the top. Oh, up to the top. There you go. And this is right side bottom. And let's change the opacity down to 50%. Let's change to move it, and let's just laterally shift it in. I might just rotate this a bit, again using this top point as an anchor, and maybe move it a bit more. And that looks good. And then bring the opacity back up to 100%. Add a mask. Invert that mask. Choose my paintbrush. Get rid of the marching ants. While the mask is selected, with white selected on my paintbrush, I am simply going to paint. Maybe harden that brush a little bit. Oops. I've got the sweater here, don't want that. There you go. And change it to black and just soft brush and bring some of that texture back in there. There you go. And then take that away. So it's just alternating white and black painting on the mask to get an effect that looks natural. With the flyaways are still there, they're just moved. And there you go. So let's just take a peek at that now. and toggle that off and on from there to there. Now, there's a bit of a vestige that happened down here or something. So let's just take that mask and take that off. Don't know how that happened. Okay, so if we now look and just select all of these, so I've got now the top of the head and all down that right side, we've gone from there to there. So it's still looking natural, and we still have some flyaways, but they're significantly reduced. And we just rinse, repeat that down the other side. I won't bore you with that. That's easy to do. But let me show you one other thing that we do just to tidy up. So let's assume we've done the bottom or the left side. We would, under layer, merge visible. So that now stamps out a new layer that has all those corrections in it. And we can take these layers off if we want. And let's call this new background layer. And now with the in-painting brush, if you wanted to go in there and just tidy up some of the weird ones that stick out a bit too far, then go ahead and do that. This is an interesting one because it crosses that two hairs. There's a couple of tricks we can use with that. I don't mind that. Well, no, that one here does bother me. So let's take that out. So I'm going to take it out with the in-paint tool. And this is an interesting one because you've got hairs that are crossing hairs. So what I use now is I now do use the clone tool. So the clone 100%. And let's take a sample from up there. And then we're just going to paint down there and then take a sample from there and paint up there. And that now is fixed. Okay, back to my in-painting tool and in-paint. And if you want, you can take some of these other ones down. But that's now just a simple tidy up. Those are easy things to do. And there you are. That's my hair grafting lateral shift flyaway reduction technique. I've got to find a better name for that. So hopefully you enjoyed that and find it useful. And hopefully it'll also speed up your retouching process. So thanks for watching and hope you have a great day.